So for some reason, the Split Pad Pro, these are the Joy-Cons from Hori. If you remember, we saw these start to really get shown off at E3, and the idea here was that they were supposed to be Daemon X Machina themed Joy-Con controller replacements. We don't really get a lot of Joy-Con controllers, to be honest. I mean, Hori's like the one real big reputable company, I guess, that has attempted to do something with them. And they always come with a bunch of drawbacks, cutout features, and the one thing they generally will add are things like a D-pad, but for the most part, you lose a lot of features. However, they also cut down the pricing. Now, the Split Pad Pro does have a massive advantage, I will say, over the current Joy-Con controllers, but it's also missing a lot of stuff. And today I figured we'd go over it. This has just been so difficult to find in my area, and I've seen them actually jump up in price online. Like eBay, these things are selling for like $80 to $90 in some cases, which is crazy to me. However, Wood from Beat 'em Ups was actually able to find some of these and let me know just in case I wanted to check them out. So fortunately, thanks to Wood, I'm able to do so. So make sure you guys check his channel up, of course, Beat 'em Ups, if you have not already. And let's take a look at these the Split Pad Pro from Hori, because I actually have quite a bit to say about them. Now, looking around the box, it definitely has that Daemon X Machina theming all over it, which is weird because for the most part, the only thing on the Hori Joy-Con controllers that even use any type of branding is the X button that has like the Daemon X on it. Otherwise, though, it's just, I guess, kind of the color scheme. For the most part, it seems like Hori was just able to use it thanks to their partnership, it seems, with Nintendo, where these are officially licensed and everything. And I guess they figured, hey, we want to do something with them. So let's go get Daemon X Machina, which is a game that could probably use the help anyway because of course what we've seen with Marvelous. And looking around the box, they do kind of outline some of the features on the back. They have a D-pad, full-size shoulder buttons, and programmable rear triggers. So they do have kind of macro triggers, something we've talked about with like Power A and stuff. It seems to be kind of a common thing to add just to give you a little bit more value. But again, we have some drawbacks there. A lot of stuff to go over here. So let's just go ahead and unbox this guy. I do like the look of the box though. It looks good. And it does come with two. So this is two different Joy-Con controllers. We have left and right. So we have both of them here and then some instructions, which you will want to go over because we do have some methods to assign buttons and activate turbo features and everything. But for these together is $49.99 is what the retail is. Again, online, they are sold out all over the place. Amazon, for example, and then eBay just has a ton of them marked up. So if you're fortunate enough to find these in stores, it might be worth picking up depending, just for the rarity. Like, these are probably going to become, like, collector edition controllers until we see massive restock on these that are just, they're just hard to find. Like, some people might buy them and not even open them up and just say, oh, part of my collection. But looking at the Joy-Con controllers, I like the color scheme, although I will admit I am partial to the, to kind of red accents on controllers, so They kind of already picked the right color scheme for me. And then they also have orange kind of for the assign and turbo. The X, of course, is the one thing that appears to be Daemon X Machina themed, where they have just this big, bright Daemon X Machina themed X right there. Otherwise, though, we do have kind of the red themed joysticks, which go all the way around there. So it's like the whole bottom part, the cap and everything. And then on the back, it continues kind of this all black all the way around. However, it does have kind of this texture on the bottom here. It's basically like a bunch of dots essentially on the bottom, just to, I guess, give it a bit more grippiness. However, I would have preferred if they went with some kind of like rubberized texture on the back. I think that would have done a lot better, but this is what they decided to go with here. Now, looking around the top, we do have the full ZR that they talk about here. It has some travel, and you don't necessarily need travel for these since they're digital triggers, but that's what they decided to do. And the whole idea of these two Joy-Con controllers is to give you a better grip. So of course they both slide onto each side. So you have right, then you have left, and it adds quite a bit to your portable Switch. It's not as portable then. It's quite large actually. And the whole point, I would say, is to make it so that if you have larger hands and like the Joy-Con controllers are just not cutting it for you because they're just small and they keep sliding down your hands, for example, or it's kind of tough to get a good grip on them, these would probably do you much better. But of course you can also get a Satisfy grip or any other grip that's on the market. So would you buy it strictly for just having a better grip on your system? That's kind of tough to say. Now, the reason I say this is because there's a bit more to take in than just the controllers themselves when it comes to how large they are and able to be gripped, because the analog sticks have a massive advantage over the Joy-Con. The stock Joy-Con has a stick that has very little travel to it, and that ends up being a problem in things like first-person shooters such as Doom, whereas this is a full-fledged joystick. Think of the Xbox One controller, for example, that joystick, and it kind of is that, just not as much tension. I would say it's closer tension-wise to something like the Switch Pro controller, but these definitely feel like more like Xbox One joysticks. If I picked either one up, whether it's my Xbox One controller or my Switch Pro controller, I would probably rank these closer to the Xbox One joystick. They, of course, click in, and they work way better when it comes to playing games like Doom or Wolfenstein, or, well, we have Doom Eternal coming up. These would work great for that as well, just because they're way more accurate. Now, A, B, X, and Y are spongy, so they're not clicky like you see with something like the Joy-Con where you can hear them click. This is, again, more like the Pro controller, which is something I do like. I like kind of the more spongy rather than the clicky buttons. That is, of course, something that you may prefer. You might like the clickiness of the Joy-Con, in which case, be prepared for these if you want them. It's also more raised, so A is actually quite a bit higher than what you might be used to with this, where it's very shallow. These buttons have some significant travel to them, specifically A, because it follows the curvature of this controller. So A has quite a ways to go before it's actually pressed. And then you also have Start, Home, Assign, and Turbo, all of which have travel, but not nearly as much as the face buttons. These are all rubber, but they're still fairly responsive, I would say. So we're now into Doom here, and it does feel way better to use these joysticks, specifically because of how much further they can move than what we're used to in the Joy-Con, where they're much more shallow in terms of their movement. This has the entire travel that you would need when you're playing a first-person shooter. So these type of games, especially like a game like Doom where it's supposed to be faster, you're just going to get a better experience overall than what you would normally with the Joy-Con controllers with those joysticks. Now, I talked to you a little bit about the macro buttons on the back, right, where you can press it and it'll act as a face button or a button on that side. And that is the one issue I actually ended up having with these controllers. So they're both attached to the Switch. And you look at that and you say, okay, well, maybe I don't want to worry about having to press a face button to jump. That's something that I thought about, and I said, well, I'm going to assign one button to jump, and then I'll assign the other one to something like Melee, for example, like this, right? And the idea there to me was like, okay, I'll press this one to jump, this one to Melee, and then I won't really have to take my hands, in that case, off of like the face buttons, or the joysticks, I'm sorry, and I won't have to click into Melee. I can just quickly tap, and then it'll work. Here's the problem. If I use the right one and this macro, it can only map to anything on this side, not this side, and that's vice versa. So on the left side, I cannot make that any of these face buttons. It can only be stuff over here, and as you can see, there's very limited options here, right? So I can make it the click in on the left stick, which for some games, that would probably help, right? I believe I can also make it different parts of the D-pad. You cannot make it plus or minus. I could also make it like ZL or just L if you want. That, to me, is a pretty large drawback as it limits the customization and one of the big features they throw on there. I have a feeling that has to do with just the way it connects to the Switch through the rails. And unfortunately, that to me is kind of a deal breaker when it comes to the macro, considering there are controllers out there. Of course, they're not Joy-Cons, but they are Pro controller replacements that can do just that and give you a better experience on your TV and I guess in tabletop mode. It's also really funny to look at these because when they are attached to your Switch, they have like a gap like that high. Like, these are very thick Joy-Con controllers and they don't sit flush with your Switch on the back or the front. Like, your Switch looks pretty small comparative to it. In fact, if you look at it from the top, you can see we have just this large gap running all the way down there, and then on the back. They do put these little stands on the back here, which I assume is so that it doesn't have to rest on ZR or ZL, and it just adds a little bit extra stability, but I mean, come on. We're on update 9.0 at this point. I don't think I could kick this thing over. Fortunately, mapping that macro button is very easy. You press and hold a sign, and then you press whichever button you want it to be. And again, you just have limited options. Turbo is also very easy. You press and hold turbo, and then you press a button. From then on, you just press the button down and hold it, and it'll just tap it a million times. It's obvious turbo functionality where it just keeps mashing the button over and over again. Very easy. Now, I'm not a big fan of R or L on this controller, and I already know why. I did check these out previously, and I have a great idea of what's going on here. I think a lot of that has to do with it not having a spring and basically relying on the rubber membrane inside of it to basically push the bumper back up after you press it down. That causes it to feel kind of spongy and not really have much resistance when it comes back. So it doesn't sound that bad, but when you press it and then you have to kind of wait for it to basically rise back up, it almost feels like if you spilled something sticky into your Joy-Con where it clicks here and it would slowly come back up. That's kind of what's happening here. And it's a bit unfortunate because I feel like if they had put a spring on either one, it would have had a bit more of a kickback to it. So it'll kick right back up and it'll actually feel a bit more quality. Of course, the other drawback is, well, it's missing a lot. There's no gyro, there's no rumble, there's no NFC, and of course there's no connectivity when you take them off the railings. At this point, it's dead. It doesn't have a battery inside at all. That also leads it to be very, very light. So there's like no weight to this. You know how we'll kind of laugh about some controllers and stuff having weights inside to try to make it feel a bit more premium? I know these only work attached to your Switch, but it might have helped, to be honest. I mean, here's the thing. If these were just wireless like this and you could use them, I don't even know how practical they would be because they're like two hamburgers basically you're holding. And of course, we also have a D-pad. The D-pad is pretty mushy. Here's the thing. If you like, it's the same D-pad from what I can tell that Hori put in their D-pad. I have like the Zelda one, their D-pad Joy-Con that they released. It seems to be that same one. So if you were okay with that, this will do fine. And then of course, because it has this grip coming down around here, you do get at these better, at a better angle than you would if you were trying to hold the Joy-Con, where the biggest problem they run into is the way it's angled, and you basically have to kind of hold your palm out yourself. This does fix that, right? So you get a better angle and everything at it, but of course that can be solved if you buy a grip. But you can't fix a D-pad, right? The D-pad's there. You also can't fix the larger analog stick that has way more travel and is just more precise. So now let's go ahead and open up the Joy-Con. I'm gonna open the left one up because, to be honest, they are very similar, and there's really something I wanted to show you about this because these are not like super well built Joy-Cons inside. Listen, they're $50 for the pair, so it's $25 for each one, and they did add some extra stuff. So I kind of went into this expecting these to not be like super high quality, and now after opening them, I'm kind of confused why they're having such a hard time stocking these, because indeed they are not very well built inside, is what I'll say. And there are some pretty easy examples that we can point to. Now, when you open it up, of course, it does have the Joy-Con communication here because it does communicate to the system through the railing. The battery draw seems to be very low. They have it rated at 30 milliamps there, so it's not going to pull much power anyway from your Switch. So the battery difference will be negligible with this connected or not. And on the back here, they do rely on the rubber membrane to press the macro button back up and down. I don't have a problem with that because it doesn't feel bad. So that is perfectly fine to me, to be honest. In fact, they don't really have springs anywhere in this Joy-Con. It's all reliant on the rubber membrane to push it back. And that can work in some cases. As an example, the Switch Lite uses a similar thing as to this back here, and that will actually press it back. That's why I said this doesn't feel bad, the ZL or ZR, but I don't like R and L, and if you look in the Switch Lite after I did a teardown, they put a spring in there to help it back. I really wish they had done that here. It would have made this feel way, way better, at least with some resistance to it. Now, we're gonna go ahead and take these off here. A couple of screws. They do have this divided up into a couple of boards with the macro button, and then below that is our D-pad. Oh, and they did decide to solder the L button. Both are soldered to the board. They're not clipped in or anything like that. Again, a way to save some money there. And here is my first example. It does appear that like this here says plus and minus. So when it's going through and they're creating them, they basically have it all set up to be fairly generic. And the biggest thing that was really, really funny to me is this D-pad. A, B, X, and Y, and the D-pad are not only using the same contacts, rubber membrane, but if you pull this off, it actually says up or X, right or A, down or B, and then of course left or Y. This is the same. Like, this part is the same on the right Joy-Con as well, and that is kind of confused me a bit as to why they are having such a hard time getting these out. This is a separate board, but it seems like where they're developing these, they're using the same printout for both the D-pad and ABXY, and they're using the same printout for a lot of things in here to kind of replicate it over. And I know that's because they're trying to save money because they're technically $50 for the pair, but I'm not really sure what's causing them to not have these in stock. It is very, very strange to me. And looking at these, so one, I do like that the PCB, the motherboards inside, are like all black. I think that's great to have kind of the theme running through it, whether it's on purpose or not. And they are thick boards. Like, these are not like cheapo boards, but kind of the design process where they're using similar, I guess, layouts and everything is making me question why they're having such a hard time getting these out there for people who might want to pick them up. The joystick itself is good, and that's something I like. Again, it's a full-sized one. Yes, drifting still exists with all joysticks, but it's not the same design as what we see in the Joy-Con or anything. So these are going to feel better, right, for pretty much anything you play, and they should be more durable overall. So yes, I do like this joystick. That's the biggest advantage this thing has over the regular Joy-Con controllers, and you're gonna have to decide if that's enough for you with the grip to get these and then give up all the other stuff. Also, one last thing, they did equip the D-pad with a very large spike in the middle here, so you shouldn't really have any crazy false button presses. Just keep in mind, it is using the same rubber membrane that ABXY is using, so there is quite a bit of travel technically when pressing the D-pad, and it feels spongy. So think of what you're used to with like your Switch Pro controller ABXY, but then put like kind of a D-pad over it. That's similar to what you're seeing here. They really didn't do much to design it differently, like, at all. And unfortunately, it kind of leaves me with, I would say, an average to below average D-pad in general. And so those are the Hori Split Pad Pro Joy-Con controllers. I will at least give Hori some credit. They're attempting to release these type of accessories, which are, you know, Joy-Con replacements, and I don't really see that many companies doing it. We've had some from China, for example, off of like AliExpress, and they're not that great, and I haven't seen much from anyone else. So I'll at least give them some credit that they are attempting it, and they're trying to do it at a reasonable price. I mean, we see how much a pair of Joy-Con controllers cost from Nintendo at $80. This is the same price as just one of them, right, at $50. It's just missing a lot, right? No wireless functionality, which might be a problem for a lot of people because you're not really going to use these when it's docked. This is a handheld only type thing, and you can still dock the Switch when you're using it, which is fine, but you're not going to use these away from it. So you can technically leave them on there, drop it on your dock, have your Joy-Con, your Pro Controller ready to play docked, and then when you go, you can take it with you. Just keep in mind, it's going to make your Switch less portable because it's going to make it much larger, and you'll at least gain some benefit out of something like full-fledged joysticks, which is something I really like, and I would like to see that from another company, but I'd also like to see it with more features involved and be slightly less cheap in terms of manufacturing on the inside. I think some of us are willing to pay for premium stuff from these third parties. I just wish one of them would take a shot at like a Switch Elite controller or Switch Elite Joy-Con controllers, right, with the grips and stuff. I think there's a market for that. Thanks, guys, for watching. Let me know what you think about these down below, and like the video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if not, and I'll see you guys next time.